第三单元金融贸易课文口译一英汉口译
Since China joined the WTO, we have seen China's economic development constantly broaden and deepen, so that China is again, as it was in the early 1800s, a pillar of the international trading system. One snapshot tells this story. In 1999, when the US-China WTO agreements were concluded, China reported about $360 billion in total global trade. By 2005, the figure was $1.4 trillion, and this year's will approach $1.7 trillion, nearly 5 times as high. In 1999, China accounted for about 4% of world trade. Today, its share is approaching 10%. And as China's development has continued, and China has become a major world economy, we see changed patterns in China's economic engagement with the world. For instance, Chinese businesses are now overseas investors as well as partners and seekers of FDI within China. China's central bank is an influential actor in global finance and currency markets. Chinese science, entertainment, and engineering aspire to create, as well as to assemble innovative and technology-intensive products. China's development and commercial success, and its expanded role in the world, should be welcomed. China's trade boom supports economic growth around the world, reduces poverty in China, strengthens China's relationships, and ultimately helps foster a stronger peace. Indeed, these outcomes are consistent with the basic principles of the world trading system and the vision set forth by its founders, including China 60 years ago. But because the pace of integration is so rapid, and because China is so large, integration is a disruptive as well as a beneficial event. Modern economic history offers few parallels, if any exist, for such a massive and rapid rise. Some of its ripple effects relate to the relationships between China and regional trading partners. Some relate to macroeconomic issues that affect the global economy as a whole. Governments can let them pass, under the risky assumption that they will work out over time. Or governments can become belligerent, playing to political and more nationalistic audiences. Or they can try to cooperate in easing the frictions, tensions, and imbalances that have emerged, as I hope they will. Let me turn to several of the effects of China's global integration. New regional patterns. First, China's economic growth has remade the Asian economic map, reshaping a 50-year-old pattern of Pacific trade and investment centered on exports to the United States. This new pattern needs to be understood and properly managed by policymakers. After the Second World War, most of China's neighbors developed by exporting manufactured goods to the United States. Japan rose first, then Korea, and Singapore. Like geese flying in formation, then the middle-sized Asian states, in effect, Asian development rested upon FDI from Japan, and then from the newly industrializing countries, NICs, plus an economically receptive American market. This pattern endured until roughly the time China joined the WTO. It is now changing. China's opening, beginning with domestic economic reform and then accelerated by the implementation of WTO commitments, has sparked a wave of Asian investment in the mainland. Japan, Korea, Taiwan, Hong Kong, and Singapore combine each year to invest $40 to $50 billion in FDI in China. This FDI, said to put up 15,000 or more manufacturing facilities annually, has very quickly combined the financial and technological strengths of China's neighbors with China's own relatively low costs, large manpower reserves, and excellent trade infrastructure. Today, China is the productive center. Japan and the tigers are suppliers of capital and technology, and the ASEAN countries, Siberia, and to an extent the world, are raw material suppliers. More prosaically, China is now the major export market for almost all Asian states. Korea, Singapore, the Philippines, perhaps soon Japan, and Chinese exports have begun to displace light manufacturers from Korea, Taiwan, and the ASEAN states in the American market. The phenomenon is natural and not to be reversed. It does, however, pose some difficult questions. Apart from the North Korean situation, which has its own roots, residual tensions in the Northeast Asia, especially those still present between Japan and China, can lead to unhealthy competition for influence and markets. Lower and middle-income Asian states are worried about their eroding shares of the American market, despite their export growth to China, since Americans remain the principal buyers of light manufacturing products, which are often very important job creators. And the least developed Asian states, such as Cambodia and Bangladesh, seem to be getting relatively little benefit from exports to China, while being squeezed hard in the American clothing market. One result has been a scramble for agreements between ASEAN countries and major economies, and between major economies themselves. They are creating the potential for an extremely complex trade environment. To be sure, such agreements may be advantageous in alliance-building terms. Economically, their soundness and wisdom remain to be seen absent in a more inclusive strategy. U.S.-China bilateral trade relations. The second key ripple effect runs across the Pacific Ocean. The United States continues to be China's most important trading partner. Sino-American trade has roughly tripled since WTO membership. While our data do not exactly tally with Chinese figures, the trends it reveals are about the same. U.S. exports to China have grown from $18 billion in 2001 to perhaps $60 billion. U.S. imports from $100 billion in 2001 to nearly $300 billion this year. This is an enormous volume of trade involving very large sums of money. The $300 billion in imports compares to about $1.5 trillion in American manufacturing, value-added production. Even the United States, a $12 or $13 trillion economy, cannot accommodate $200 billion in import growth in 5 years without some stress and anxiety. You see the social adjustments in the fact that our manufacturing employment has fallen from 17 to 14 million since 2000. And the tensions are accented by the rise in our trade and current account deficits since 2000, coupled more recently with a rapid rise in China's surpluses. Europe has similar worries about competitiveness, highlighted by the EU's recent clothing and shoe import restrictions, and a growing concern about Europe's global economic positioning. Japan's concerns often tend to be more strategic, revolving around the Japanese place in Asian markets and the long-term political relationship between Asia's two leading economies. India is finding its own niche, examining how to keep up with Chinese industrial growth, but also capitalizing on its own strengths in technology, English language proficiency, and the world services markets. And Russia, using oil as its trump card, seeks to balance an Eastern and Western orientation. But nowhere is the China trade debate as volatile or passionate as in the US, and this ripple effect of China's re-emergence will not abate anytime soon, as we will see both before and after the 2006 and 2008 US elections. The third ripple effect of China's re-emergence is felt in commodity markets. The impact of China's development on both commodity developing countries and commodity consuming nations. Chinese industrial demand has created metals and energy-based export booms in Africa, the Middle East, South America, and Russia. Chinese aluminum use rose from 3 to 7 million tons between 1999 and 2005. China's oil consumption is still far behind ours in America, but now ranks second in the world and will soon equal that of Japan and Germany combined. Over the past 6 years, the prices of almost all major commodities have soared. The effects on commodity suppliers are large and not always entirely positive. Some countries in these regions, especially Africa and the Middle East, have been too reliant on oil and metal exports. While commodity trade generates lots of money, which, if used well, can be a powerful spur to development and growth. There is, as yet, no clearly defined policy agenda for governments flowing from changed commodity markets, but such change is an important and inevitable effect of China's reemergence, with India to follow, which will continue to have both positive and negative implications worldwide.
2. 汉英口译。谈到中美贸易问题，首先要看到一个最基本的事实，这就是25年来，我们两国之间的贸易有了巨大的发展，从1979年的不足25亿美元发展到今天的1000多亿美元，增长了几十倍。这种巨额增长是不是只对一方有利而对另一方不利？或者说只是中国赚了而美国亏了？不是，事实上两国都从迅速发展的中美贸易中获得了巨大的利益。中美贸易之所以能迅速发展，根本原因在于两国经济具有极大的互补性，这种互补性很大程度上来自两国资源条件、经济结构以及消费水平存在着很大的差异。中国是最大的发展中国家，市场广阔，发展迅速，劳动力成本低，但资金短缺，科技和管理相对落后。美国是最大的发达国家，经济总量大，资本充足，科技发达，但劳动力成本高。这种差异性和互补性将在今后长期存在，在经济全球化的大背景下显得更加突出。我认为，这就是中美贸易能够持续快速发展的客观基础。中国有一句描写登泰山感受的古诗：会当凌绝顶，一览众山小。我们对待中美贸易问题要有这种高瞻远瞩的战略眼光，诸如美中贸易逆差问题、人民币汇率问题、知识产权保护问题，贵国社会各界甚为关注。所有这些问题是在中美贸易发展中出现的问题，是可以取得共识，也是可以逐步得到解决的，不应该也不可能影响中美经贸发展大局。滔滔长河有时会卷起漩涡，漫漫历史进程难免会发生波折。随着中美经贸合作规模的扩大，有点摩擦在所难免。只要双方有诚意，这一类问题完全可以通过平等协商和扩大合作来加以妥善解决。回顾中美贸易关系发展25年的历史，我们应当从中汲取一些重要的经验和教训。我愿意就发展中美公平贸易和经济合作提出5条原则与各位商榷。这5条原则是：第一，互利共赢。从大处着眼，既要考虑自己的利益，又要考虑对方的利益。第二，把发展放在首位，通过扩大经贸合作来化解分歧。第三，发挥双边经贸协调机制作用，及时沟通和磋商，避免矛盾激化。第四，平等协商，求大同存小异，不动辄设限和制裁。第五，不把经贸问题政治化。这5条原则是建立在世贸组织框架和国际贸易基本准则基础上的，也是正确认识和妥善处理今后一个时期中美贸易可能出现的分歧和摩擦所需要的。这5条原则的核心和精髓是6个字：发展、平等、互利。发展是动力，平等是前提，互利是目的。我想这完全符合我们两国之间发展建设性合作关系的要求。以解决两国贸易不平衡为例，所谓把发展放在首位，就是强调向前看，通过进一步扩大两国贸易来缩小不平衡。大家知道，美中贸易逆差扩大，这不是我们所追求的，但是靠减少中国对美国的出口，这不是一个好办法，因为这样做既不利于中国，也无助于解决美国国内失业问题，反而会严重损害美国广大消费者和美国在华企业的利益。比较现实的做法是，美国进一步扩大对中国的出口。为此，我们已经以最大的诚意和最大的努力， 大幅度增加了对美国农产品和机电产品的进口，并将进一步扩大我所需商品的采购。同时，我们也希望美国承认中国市场经济国家地位，解除对中国高新技术出口的限制。在这方面，我真诚地希望美国有关方面把那些陈旧观念和不合时宜的做法抛到太平洋去，来一个大胆的与时俱进。口译实践一，英汉口译。
And while we all know that the next stage of global economic change brings each of our countries insecurities, as well as challenges and opportunities, I believe that there are great possibilities ahead for an even greater prosperity that now beckon China and Britain together. I believe we can make best use of these opportunities in greater cooperation and in sustained partnership. Others see globalization as a risk. I see the rise of China and the reality of globalization not as a threat, but as an opportunity. An opportunity because China is a vast potential market for British companies. An opportunity because Britain, with our long record of economic stability and of openness and of enterprise, is well placed to augment our reputation as a destination of choice for Chinese business and Chinese investment. And an opportunity because Britain and China can contribute together to the greater prosperity of a better world. With 1.25 billion consumers here in China, for British companies to attract even a fraction of that Chinese market will provide vastly more opportunities for Britain than partnerships with many other countries. So, my priority here in China is to discuss how, by cooperating together, we can advance the right global economic policies to help our countries meet and master change in this new world. We may be different in many ways, but China and Britain have much to offer each other. Britain had the first industrial revolution 200 years ago and brought one of the most far-reaching changes in human history. Today, China is in the midst of a 21st century revolution, one of the fastest economic revolutions in human history. Britain has the longest history of any nation in leadership for open trade and innovation. China is a new global leader in trade, rapidly developing new technologies that are being exported to the world. Britain is a world leader in services with strengthened advanced manufacturing. China is a world leader in manufacturing, looking to develop its services sector. With all the differences, what we have in common is a belief in enterprise, in commerce, that the products of the future can reach out far beyond our borders and bring prosperity to the whole world. And ultimately, neither of us can succeed as insular nations, and we see great gains on both sides from joining together as the champions of an open, flexible, inclusive globalization. Over the centuries, Britain has had free trading relationships with every country in the world, and particularly deep relationships with America, Europe, and the Commonwealth. Now, looking forward into this 21st century, I want Britain to reach out to China, to build that comprehensive strategic partnership, and forge an even closer relationship between our two countries. The greatest benefit to China is that we, Britain, will continue to oppose protectionist forces and will remain the foremost advocates of the openness in the world economy, essential not only to China's prosperity but to the world's. The biggest benefit to Britain is that we strengthen our place as the destination of choice for Chinese business and Chinese investment, and both of us can benefit from sharing the innovations and the expertise that characterize the best of each of our nations. For 2 decades, British politicians talked about going to China and opening up discussions. Now we are talking about something bigger, forging a high-level dialogue, each reaching out to the other. And because with friendship comes responsibility, being a good partner also means being honest with each other when we disagree. To set an overall framework, Premier Wen and I have agreed to establish the first high-level economic and financial dialogue between China and Britain. and it is one that is more comprehensive and deeper than any previous dialogue between China and any European country. And working in cooperation with the Chinese government and Chinese business, I hope to see by 2010 100 more Chinese inward investment projects coming to Britain, over 100 Chinese companies now listed on the London Stock Exchange, up to 100,000 Chinese students studying in Britain, 100 partnerships between Chinese and British universities and other academic institutions, 100 more scientific collaborations between Chinese and British firms, with Britain benefiting from a large share of investment from China's 1 billion GBP Sovereign Wealth Fund. And we will take the following immediate steps to advance the partnerships. First, Premier Wen and I have signed up today a new target for a 50% increase in bilateral trade in goods and services, rising to 6 billion by 2010. More trade between Britain and China than between Britain and Australia, or Britain and Mexico, a rising proportion of the trade of both of our countries, and building on the 6 new contracts we have just signed between Britain and Chinese firms, from energy to financial services to advanced technology. I want British business to set their sights on raising their exports in goods and services to China to $16 billion by 2010, almost double that of 2006. I want, secondly, to take steps to make the United Kingdom the prime location in Europe for inward Chinese investment. 52 Chinese companies have set up or expanded investment into the UK during the past year. There are now in total 350 mainland Chinese companies investing in the UK to work with and secure 100 more inward investment projects from China. I believe that the UK market offers significant advantages to commercially motivated international investors who respect the rules of our market, including market transparency. It is in all our interests that the environment within which we trade is open and accountable and well regulated, and we want Britain to benefit from the $200 billion of investment available through the Chinese Investment Corporation. So we should welcome the CIC setting up an office in London. We are keen to engage with China and internationally on how to ensure best practice in sovereign wealth funds, particularly in transparency and corporate governance. And I welcome the statements made by Premier Wen today about this very matter. We are thirdly inviting more Chinese companies to raise capital in UK markets. The aim is to double the number of Chinese listings on the London Stock Exchange in the next 2 years. The Chinese government has fast-tracked the approval process, so during this visit I am pleased to be able to open the London Stock Exchange office in Beijing, and I am asking the Chinese government to consider removing restrictions on Chinese companies raising capital overseas so that far more of them can benefit from the advantage that listing in London can offer. We will, fourthly, continue to work with the Chinese government to open up financial services in China and increase trade between us in the years ahead. The financial services sector is one in which Britain leads the world, so we can not only become an even greater provider of financial services to China, but offer our experience and expertise as China develops its own financial services industry. Finally, as leading economies, both Britain and China share a duty to deliver future prosperity and do so in a sustainable way. And there are real benefits in new businesses and new jobs from the environmental technologies of the future. So Premier Wen and I have agreed today a new UK-China partnership on climate change, including extending our collaboration on carbon capture and storage. And we will work together to build sustainable cities, providing new commercial opportunities for both Chinese and British industry and companies. From Britain's perspective, the opportunities for future partnership seem boundless, and we will continue to make the right long-term decisions to maintain our pro-business environment and secure the comparative advantages we seek. What is clear is that globalization need not be a zero-sum game, where one country or one continent win and succeed only at the expense of the other. Instead, by strengthening cooperation between Britain and China, this will enable both of us to make the most of the possibilities that globalization offers. And I believe that the new global prosperity partnership that I am outlining today will help each of us, Britain and China, prosper and lead in the new world. And I look forward to continued cooperation with Premier Wen and with the whole of China in advancing this agenda that is in the mutual interests of both our countries and the prosperity of the world.
2. 汉英口译。
中国金融业的改革发展也得益于金融业的对外开放。1979年10月，中国改革开放的设计师和领导者邓小平先生请荣毅仁先生组建了中国国际信托投资公司，这是一个经营范围广泛的集金融业与实业为一体的集团公司。它的设立为中国经济开辟了一个对外开放的窗口，利用外资的窗口和国际融资的窗口。此后，中国开始允许外资金融机构在中国设立代表处、营业机构、入股中资金融机构等等。中国金融业的改革开放进入了一个崭新的时代。是金融业的改革开放，让中国从以既无内债又无外债为荣的狭隘认识中走出来，学会运用金融工具和国际资金为中国的经济发展服务。在中国的传统观念中，负债是一个无奈的选择。过去，中国人要购买一件较昂贵的物品，往往要存款数月或者数年。如果借钱，会被认为是一件不光彩的事，或自己没有本事。在计划经济时期，我们曾经以既无内债又无外债而自豪。改革开放以来，随着对外经济交往的逐步加深，中国人的观念发生了重大变化。1979年起，中国政府恢复了中断20年的外债举借，当年获得35亿美元国外借款。1981年，中国政府决定发行国库券，当年发行仅49亿元人民币。随着金融业的发展，贷款消费的观念也逐渐被中国的普通百姓所接受，日常生活中也越来越离不开金融系统所提供的各种服务和便利。1985年，中国建设银行深圳市分行贷出了第一笔个人住房按揭贷款。截至2005年末，中国国债余额 2.7 万亿元人民币，外债余额2600多亿美元，住房按揭贷款余额 1.84 万亿元人民币。中国银行业资产已达 37.5 万亿元人民币，是中国 GDP 的 2.06 倍。是金融业的改革开放，让中资金融机构在市场的竞争中，特别是在与外资金融机构的竞争中，提高了经营管理水平。外资金融机构也在中国的不断开放中得到了发展。外资银行在与中资金融机构竞争中所展示的方法、理念，对中资机构起到了示范作用。比如外资银行开展的中间业务服务、对银行业务的专利申请、对银行账户服务收费、细分客户市场，以及内部管理中的制衡理念等，都对中资银行改进经营管理理念和方法起到了积极的作用。上海是中国内地金融业最发达的城市，也是金融业开放度最高的城市，但这并没有对中资金融机构的发展造成影响。上海的中资金融机构基本上是各家银行盈利水平最高的分行，资产质量最好的分行和金融产品创新最多的分行。随着中国经济的发展和中国金融改革的深入，中资机构的经营管理水平不断提高，盈利能力不断增强。中资银行实现盈利从2001年的232亿元人民币增长到2005年的2532亿元人民币。与此同时，中资银行的贷款质量也得到极大的改善，不良贷款率从2001年 25.4% 降到了2005年的 9.8%。外资金融机构的盈利从2001年的 1.96 亿美元 增长到2005年的 4.46 亿美元。中国是一个信守诺言的国家，中国政府按照加入世贸组织协议，按时甚至部分提前兑现了金融业开放的承诺。2005年12月，我们提前向外资金融机构开放哈尔滨、长春、兰州、银川、南宁5个城市的人民币业务，从而使开放人民币业务的城市从18个增加到25个。在证券业和保险业方面，除尚未开放合资公司从事 A 股承销外，中国政府已在市场准入和业务范围上全面落实了入市承诺。目前外资入股中资银行，如要享受中资银行的业务范围，入股总比例不能超过 25%， 单个外资不能超过 20%。 到2006年底，当中国全面向外资银行开放人民币业务后，这一比例限制只在税收征收上有意义，对业务经营范围的自由度将不再有约束力。入市这几年的实践表明，尽管这几年外资银行的业务增长比率高于中资金融机构，但外资银行占全国银行业的份额并没有太大的变化。2001年和2005年，外资银行资产占银行业资产的比例分别为 1.8% 和 1.89%， 人民币贷款占比分别为 0.35% 和 0.55%， 外汇贷款占比为 14.7% 和 20.97%。 随着2006年人民币业务的放开，在人民币业务方面的比重可能会有所增加。到2005年，已有25家外资银行向中国20家中资银行投资入股，其中有些银行或投资人入股多家中资银行。我们认为，在国有商业银行股份制改革过程中，引入战略投资者主要目的是引入新的经营理念和管理技术，是为了促进中资银行治理结构的改善。对引入战略投资者，中国的监管当局提出了长期持股、优化治理、业务合作、竞争回避的原则，在国家保持绝对控股权的前提下，增加外国投资人和社会公众投资者，将会促进国有商业银行治理结构的改善和经营管理水平的提高。